Brett muttered to himself. More? The pretty waitress asked, emphasizing her question by lifting the coffee pot in her hand. Brett looked at his watch. No, I have to go. He took a last sip of what was left in his cup, left $2 on the table, paid the Sable bill and left. He had an appointment with Terry, his future ex-wife. He couldn't believe that she considered herself eligible for the Continental. It took him more than 2 years to recover. Of course, she helped a little, but this car belonged to him from the moment he saw it. It was his child, his pride and joy, and now she wanted to take her away from him. When he arrived at his former home, he was a little surprised to see that she had not yet put the house up for sale. They hadn't lived there long enough to accumulate real capital, maybe 10 or 15,000, but none of them wanted to continue living there. So they decided to sell the house and split the profits. Everything was very civilized. In fact, Brett and Terry's divorce was as civilized as it could possibly be, except for the car. It was a 1960 Continental Mark V town car. Brett saw him in the backyard of an old farmhouse when he was driving through Indiana one day. It was exactly the same as the one his father had when he was a child. He usually didn't like classic cars, but there was something about this car. Brett stopped to talk to the farmer. He told the gray-haired old man in bib overalls that he would be happy to remove this old car from the site for free. But the farmer was not stupid. He knew perfectly well that the car was worth several $1,000s. Even in the condition it was in, they conferred and finally came up with a figure that they both agreed on. But before Brett could spend that kind of money, he would have to talk to his wife. "What do you know about restoring old cars?" "What is it?" she asked. "Nothing, but I can learn," he replied. They discussed it for several days, but Terry wasn't convinced. It was a lot of money, and if he lost interest in the old car, what then? Will they be able to sell it and get their money back, or will it just rust in the backyard? Like a farmer's? Brett had already done a little investigation and assured her that there was no way they could lose the money. Even if he didn't do anything with it, he could sell the car in its current condition for more than they paid. In the end, it was her husband's enthusiasm that was the deciding factor. With his wife's blessing, Brett arranged for the delivery of the car. A week later, when Terry saw her being unloaded from the ship, she had doubts, but it was too late. They became the proud owners of an old rusty pile of scrap metal. "I know she doesn't look good right now, honey, but I'm going to bring her back to life. I'm going to make her young again," he said with a wide grin. Terry has always believed in her husband. In her opinion, there was little he could have done if he had made an effort, so she immediately decided that she would support and help him in any way she could. Of course, that was many years ago. How the Continental represented the proverbial line drawn in the sand of a failed marriage. He felt a little strange. It was the first time he had returned since he left almost 5 months ago as he walked up the flat stone steps leading to the porch. A feeling of sadness did not leave him. He and Terry tried so hard to lay them out properly. Oh, he knew that divorce was the best thing for both of them. Terry felt the same way. Damn it! That was the only thing they both agreed on in recent years. Nevertheless, they had many wonderful years together. Brett was just raising his hand to knock when the front door opened. He had almost forgotten how beautiful she was. "Hi, Brett, come in." She smiled, stepping aside. For a brief moment, he forgot why he was here. The grin started to break free until he suddenly remembered the car. He immediately went on the offensive. "Terry, I can't believe you think you're entitled to the Continental. What the hell would you do with it if you had it?" "Wait, Brett," she said. "Let's talk about it over a cup of coffee. I just made a fresh one." Her pleasant smile and calm demeanor were disarming. What the hell? He thought she always made the best coffee in town. Why not? He began to relax a little when Terry poured him a cup. He was pleased and comfortable to be back in his own kitchen. Unable to resist, he watched her from behind as she walked over to the counter and returned the pan to its place. A smile appeared on his face as he took his first sip of the hot black nectar. She returned to the table and sat down with her cup of coffee. So she said, looking into his eyes, "Why do you think I'm not eligible for the Continental?" So far, the conversation had not gone as he had expected. He was on edge. He was ready to fight, but there was absolutely no aggression in her voice. He thought they would already be yelling at each other. But then they never yelled at each other. Even when they decided to divorce, the conversations were polite and tactful, but even then, she never talked about taking his car. Brett studied her expression. She was always difficult to understand, but she seemed ready to negotiate. Maybe she'll listen to reason. Maybe there won't be any struggle. He'll just logically state his case. When he's done, she'll come to the only rational conclusion: the car belongs to him. Terry, if you remember, I was the one who bought this car. I did all the work on it. Wait a minute, she said again. The money for this car was taken from our savings. I put as much money into this account as you did. I'd say we split the cost of the car, wouldn't we? She was right. They both put the same amount of money into a savings account every month, but still he did all the work. And what do you mean you did all the work? She continued. You did most of the physical work? Yes, but who spent hour after hour at the computer looking for all the details? It must mean something. Damn, he thought. Another point in her favor. Things really weren't going the way he expected. She's not finished yet either. I even helped you with the car sometimes. Not very often, he interjected, deciding that he had earned 1 point for himself. Maybe not. We both know that I'm not a mechanic, and a lot of this was too difficult for me. I just didn't have the strength to help. But even then, I was there for you, giving you moral support. He had to admit that she was really doing it. Brett took another sip of his coffee. He couldn't help but smile as his mind wandered into the past. God, life was so much fun back then. They seemed to do nothing but laugh and have a good time together. He missed those days. Who would have thought then that they would end up in divorce court? Brett sighed. Stop remembering. He thought, let's get back to the current task. Terry, come on. You've never even driven this car. A couple of times when I tried to get you behind the wheel, you said it would be like driving a tank, and you didn't want to risk scratching it. There's a first time for everything, Brett. Maybe you can come with me for the first time, just to make sure I drive her normally. God, he thought, what a damn arrogance. Not only does she want to take my car, but she also wants me to teach her how to drive. I'll tell you what, he objected. Let me come over on weekends and take you for a ride. Can you do it? She smiled. Of course. How many times? I do not know. As many times as you want, I think. Well, I don't have anything else planned yet. Terry said, indicating that she was thinking about it. Does this mean that I will get a car? Brett said a little impulsively. No, I was just asking, she teased. Come on, Terry. Damn it. If I'd known we were going to fight over her, I would have included her in the estate sharing agreement and left it to the judge to decide. I just thought it was an inevitable conclusion that I would keep the car. I never thought you needed it. Doesn't she bring back bad memories? Bad memories, she asked, looking a little puzzled. Which ones? Well, we've been messing around a lot in this car. Do you remember how we christened the back seat? You mean the one I was looking for 3 months before I found one that wasn't torn or worn out? Damn, I thought she's scoring points left and right. Yes, that's it, he admitted. Of course I remember. By that time, she was already working for you. We drove to the lake. You said you wanted to demonstrate how much space there is in the back. And there was too much room, she giggled. Well, in light of how you feel about me right now, I just thought that you probably wish none of this had ever happened. Is that how you feel? Would you like this to never happen? That was surprised. He thought he detected a little sadness in her voice. She certainly wasn't sad a few months ago when they were discussing divorce. She sounded like she couldn't wait to get rid of him. No, to be honest, it was one of the happiest days of my life. But then I don't understand, Brett. Why were these happy memories for you and not for me? What is it? She asked. Well, I don't know. Probably. Probably because I know that you treat me differently. Better than me to you. I see. Maybe we should talk about this before the divorce is final. How do you feel about me? Brett really didn't want to go into details. He was confused. He didn't want to admit that he still loved her, especially since he knew that she no longer loved him back. Come on, Terry. I came to talk about the car. Let's leave it at that. Damn, she cursed to herself. He can be so frustrating sometimes. Okay, Terry said, getting up to pour herself another cup of coffee. It's in my garage. You know what they say about ownership being 9 tenths of the law, she chuckled. Damn it, Terry. You agreed to keep it here until I find a place to store it. You know perfectly well that I can't just leave it in the parking lot of my apartment building. He was getting angry. She didn't want that. I know, she said. That's not what I meant. Simply, what? What now? Just what, Terry? I want to know what you meant about my bad memories. Do you think I hate you? Brett sighed slightly. It doesn't look like he's going to avoid this conversation. I don't know. Maybe you don't hate me, but you made it clear that you don't love me anymore. So it makes sense that you can think about these memories with regret. That's all. Well, I don't regret them. I don't regret anything at all that we were together. Should she say that? She was trying to lure him out. She had to find out his true feelings. But for that to happen, it looks like she'll have to confess first. She decided to go ahead and say it. I don't hate you. The only thing I regret is the breakup. Brett couldn't believe his ears. Did she just say that she regrets the breakup? What the hell? She was the one who said that they were estranged from each other, that they no longer had anything in common. Terry, you were the one who said it would be better if we got divorced and went our separate ways. Remember? Yes, I remember, but I don't remember you disagreeing with me. Well, I don't know. We just didn't seem like that loving couple anymore. I know. We were both guilty of doing what many others do after a while. We started to take each other for granted. Yes, it's probably true. But it wasn't just that, Terry. We hardly made love anymore. Do you remember what we were like in the beginning? God, we couldn't keep our hands off each other, especially when we were working on Continental. Damn, we had so much fun working on it together. He smiled again, and this time, he had to fight back tears in his eyes as a tsunami of wonderful memories flooded his mind. I have to agree, Terry replied. We were a real team. Do you remember the first time we washed it? Brett chuckled. Yes, but as far as I remember, we didn't have time to wash almost the whole car. We were too busy hosing each other down. Yeah, his future ex confirmed, giggling to herself. I don't think I've laughed that much since I was a little girl. Yes, we had wonderful times, that's for sure. But as soon as we finished with the car, we started to move away from each other. It wasn't right after we finished. We were still having fun after that. I remember driving it to your mother's and the look on her face when she saw it. Yes, she remembered right away. It was exactly the same Continental as my father's when he died. She really had tears in her eyes when we took her for a ride, Terry recalled. You're right, Brett admitted. We had a lot of fun with this car, even after it was finished. He paused to fondly recall that time. So what went wrong? Terry asked, interrupting his train of thought. You tell me. You seem to have all the answers when you started talking about divorce, he replied sharply. Brett, I was just expressing what we were both thinking at the time. Come on, none of us really worked on the marriage. It seemed that the reality of life was just constantly interfering with us. It's become more interesting for you to study with your friends than with me. Terry, the only reason I spent so much time with him was because you stopped by. I got tired of sitting at home alone, and I started dating guys. What did you expect? I'm not sure, she replied. I knew that we had problems, but I didn't know what to do. I started going to Audrey all the time, so as not to think that our marriage was in danger. This was my hideout. It seemed to me that you were losing interest in me, as well as in marriage. I always thought it was because you stopped loving me. We started making love less and less often. Terry thought about his words. Yes, I do remember that making love did not cause me such delight as in the beginning. I'm not sure exactly why, but I know it wasn't because I didn't love you anymore. It just seemed old, routine. It was as if we were doing this because that's what married people were supposed to do. But none of us had those carnal desires for each other that we had in the beginning. We had to find a way to spice it up a bit, keep it fresh. So why didn't we do it? Brett asked. Good question. If we had done that, maybe we wouldn't be here right now, a month away from ending our marriage. There was silence in the air as they both sipped their coffee. Brett was deep in thought. He wondered what was the matter. Initially, she told him that she wanted to talk to him about not taking the Continental away from her, but mostly they talked about their marriage. He began to think that she didn't need the car at all, that it was just an excuse to drag him there. Terry was thinking about it too, but not about the car. She needed to know if they were doing the right thing by getting divorced. She knew how she felt, but how did her husband feel about it? Does he want to get a divorce? Does he still love her? She decided that the only way to find out was to ask. Brett, do you still love me? Come on, Terry. We've been through this before. No, they didn't. We talked about how our lives go in different directions. We talked about our different interests. We talked about how to live life without each other. Hell, we talked about everything except how we still feel about each other. Before the divorce takes place, I need to know, do you still love me? After making the decision to divorce, Brett spent many nights in his apartment, longing for lost love. Over the years, she and Terry have transformed from a loving married couple into two people, living separate lives in the same house. They rarely quarreled, but there was no spark left. One evening, Terry started talking about the divorce. She said she thought it was time for both of them to move on. He agreed at the time, but has since realized that he made a terrible mistake. He missed her like hell. He still loved her, but it was too late. The divorce was about to become final. She had already had several dates that he knew about, and maybe more. She was already moving on. So what should he do? Embarrass himself by admitting that he still loves her? Would he really put up with it to please her? Was this the price he had to pay to get his car? Damn it, he had always been honest with her before the divorce. Should he be less honest with her now? Terry, I am. I sometimes think that. Well, maybe we're making a mistake, but I know how you feel. So damn it, Brett, stop telling me how I feel. It's obvious from our conversation that you have no idea how I feel, she said flatly. Oh, really? Then okay. How do you feel about it? I love you. These words almost took his breath away. For the first time in a long time, his heart seemed to skip a beat. Do you love me? He repeated with a smile. Yes, Brett, I still love you. But you're dating. People say you're moving on. You who? What kind of people? Are you spying on me? No, of course not. But well, people we both know are friends. You know, they told me that you were dating, that you were already looking for someone new, and they advised me to do the same. Very sighed in disappointment at their friends. Why do people always need to interfere in the affairs of others? Why run to him with everything she was doing? I dated a little. Yes, very little. I went on 3 dates with 3 different guys. She saw the question on his face that she knew he wouldn't ask, but that needed to be asked. No, Brett, I haven't slept with any of them. I won't say I wasn't tempted, because I was. I'm sure I don't need to tell you that 5 months is a long time. And to tell you the truth before each date, I thought there was a good chance that I would bring them home. But she took another sip of coffee and thought about it. She wanted to frame her next statement in a way that meant something, so that he would know that she was sincere. But by the end of each date, I no longer had the desire to make love to any of them. In fact, after the 3rd date, I realized that there was only one man I wanted to see in my bed. She looked into his eyes. It's you, Brett. You're the only man I want in my bed. Brett found it hard to believe his ears. He fantasized about them getting back together, but he didn't really think it would ever happen. He was sure that he had lost her forever. And then a thought struck him. Does she really mean that she wants to stay married? Or is she offering him a friends with benefits situation? He had to clarify the situation. Are you saying you don't want to get a divorce? A wide smile spread across her face. I think we should sleep together and talk about it in the morning. What do you think? She was right about one thing. 5 months is a long time. He still wasn't sure what she was offering. Brett followed his wife into the bedroom. Yes, she was still his wife, at least for a while. He was going to make love to her as if she were his wife. When they reached the bed, he turned and looked into her eyes. There was a desire in them that he hadn't seen in a long time. It was so long ago, not only 5 months since their breakup, but also several years before that. How could they let their love fade so much? That night, they both slept more soundly than at any time since the word divorce was first mentioned. Brett heard the joyful singing of a bird outside the bedroom window. He opened his eyes to the morning sun. Looking at the white ceiling for a short time, he realized that he was in his own house. It was not a dream. He thought it really happened. He looked around and saw his wife looking at him. A wide smile graced her beautiful face. "Good morning, handsome," she whispered. "Good morning, beautiful," he replied with the same wide smile. "We'll split up the Continental," he said. What? Her heart suddenly sank. Was he still thinking about divorcing her? "Yes, I will teach you how to drive a car, and you can drive it sometimes, and I will drive it sometimes." He looked back and saw the startled expression on her face. "I'll teach you how to drive it on one condition. You will never ever mention the word divorce again. Not now, not ever. He felt the tension in her body disappear. You got it, big boy, she promised. Okay, first thing tomorrow, I'll call my lawyer and tell him that everything is canceled. Terry decided that simple gratitude was not the way to express her appreciation. That Sunday, they had plenty of time after making love to pick up his clothes. That evening, they both renewed their vows. They held hands, looked into each other's eyes, and swore loyalty, love, honor, and respect. They vowed never to take each other for granted again and to work on their marriage every day. They both knew how close they had come to losing what was most precious to them, and they were determined never to let it happen again. On Monday, Terry was going to lunch with her best friend Audrey. Audrey was glad to see a smile on her friend's face for the first time in months. Judging by the smile, did your little trick with the car work? What is it? She asked happily. Like a mascot, Terry replied, sitting down in an armchair. What did he say? That he loves me, she replied. Today he will call a lawyer and stop the divorce. Oh, Terry, that's great. Audrey, I've been trying to figure out how we got to divorce in the first place. But I just don't get it. I think we're just tired of each other. Maybe we needed this to wake up. You know what they say, what you have, you don't keep. When you lose it, you cry. I'm glad you two realized that before you lost it. Yeah, me too, Terry replied with relief. I don't understand why you used the car. Why didn't you just call and tell him you wanted to talk about the divorce? Because I wasn't sure how he felt. I didn't know if he still loved me or not. If I had called and said I wanted to discuss the divorce, he could have just brushed me off, and I wanted to talk to him in person. I knew that the best way to make sure he would come was to threaten him that I would keep the car. Well, I couldn't be happier for you, Terry. Thank you, Audrey. But tell me if it hadn't worked out. If Brett had said he wanted to continue the divorce, would you leave the car? Are you kidding? I could never take this car away from him. It's his child. I would never be able to offend the person I love so much, even if he didn't love me back. Brett and Terry have fulfilled their vow. They worked on their marriage every day. They organized a date night, not once a month, but whenever they wanted to. Sometimes it was dinner and dancing or a show, sometimes theater, and sometimes they just parked by the lake in the back seat of the Continental. 3 years after their reconciliation, Brett's mother passed away. Both he and Terry took over all the arrangements for the funeral, and she did not leave his side a single step throughout this ordeal. A couple of weeks after the funeral, they were putting her house in order to sell it. Terry was going through the papers, receipts, and old documents that his mother had kept for many years, and Brett was packing family heirlooms in boxes. Brett, she called from the bedroom. Please get me a registration card from Continental. Registration card? Why? I just want to check something, he replied. A few minutes later, Brett handed over the Continental's registration card to his wife. Honey, do you know, you always said that this car looks like the one your father had. Yes, he replied, still a little confused. Well, you're wrong. It doesn't look like it, she said, holding the registration number up to another piece of paper. It's the same one. Really? He asked about what he thought his wife had just said. Listen, honey, your mother kept the registration documents for your father's car all these years. They are the same. Brett took the two papers from her hand and compared them side by side. She was right. The car numbers were the same. His knees weakened a little, and he had to sit on the bed next to his wife. You once told me there was something about Continental that made you want her. I always thought it was just because it reminded you of your dad's car. But it was more than that, honey. I really think it was your father who brought you to this car. It was his way of reconnecting with you. On their way back to Illinois, they stopped at a cemetery. The remains of flowers were still scattered around the freshly dug burial place of his mother. Nearby was his father's old but well-kept grave. Brett hugged his loving wife and said reverently, Look, Dad, he said, nodding at the Continental parked just a few steps away from him. I remember how much you loved this car, and I promised to take good care of it. I hope you know how much happiness and joy she brought to Terry and me. He stopped to wipe a tear from his eye. Take care of your mother. She loved you and honored your memory until the day you were reunited. He and Terry were facing each other. She wrapped her arms around him, put her head down, and hugged him. I love you so much, Brett. I love you too. Darling, he said, gently leaning his cheek against the top of her head.